This story is about me, Ellie, my younger sisters Alex and Nora, and our grandpa's old house. You see, our grandpa had just passed away, and we had to clear out the house because it was going up for sale. Little did we know, this task would unearth a dark secret that had haunted us for years. We began by sifting through old pictures and toys, remnants of our childhood memories that our grandpa had cherished. His pipe lay on the table next to his favorite old chair, right in front of the TV. We couldn't imagine him without these familiar relics. But after emptying the whole house, we were left with one daunting task: the basement. Our grandpa had raised us in this house while our mom was working. He'd lost his wife when our mom was just a child, and having us around made him feel less alone. It was a time of joy and freedom for us. We could jump on the beds, build fortresses with blankets and pillows, play hide and seek, the works. Grandpa wasn't one for many rules, except for one solemn promise we had to make. Never, ever go into the basement. The basement was an enigma, a dark abyss that sent shivers down our spines. We often heard strange and creepy noises emanating from it. Sometimes it was scratching, other times knocking, screeching, rumbling, and occasionally we swore we could hear someone or something whispering. Our mom, who had grown up in the same house, had heard those noises too, but she always brushed them off, telling us it was nothing special, just an old house with weird noises. Grandpa's explanation was that it was probably just animals, rats, a raccoon, or a lost cat. We obeyed their warnings for years, until one fateful night. It was around midnight when Nora woke up and decided to grab a drink from the kitchen. As she descended the creaky stairs, a faint voice called out from the basement, pleading, "Help me." She rushed back upstairs, her face drained of color, and told Alex and me about it. We were skeptical at first, thinking she might have been half asleep, but Nora insisted she was telling the truth. So, against our better judgment, we decided it was time to confront the basement. We first checked if Grandpa was asleep, then I sneaked into his bedroom to snatch the keys he kept in his nightstand while he slumbered. He was a heavy sleeper, and my mission went unnoticed. We unlocked the basement door and ventured down. The basement was a foreboding place, dimly lit by a single, feeble light bulb dangling from the ceiling. It was eerily quiet, unlike the usual sounds that emanated from below, and we saw nothing unusual. We decided that Nora might have been half asleep and tried to head back upstairs. But just as we turned around, the scratching and rumbling, those eerie sounds we'd grown up hearing, echoed louder. This time we could see the source of the noise. There in the corner, hidden behind some old wooden planks, was a nightmarish sight. An old woman with tangled, filthy hair, mud-caked, ripped clothes covered in spiderwebs and dust. It was a horror movie brought to life. Our screams pierced the stillness as the wretched woman began to approach us. I grabbed my sisters, pushing them up the stairs, urging them to run. As Alex and Nora fled, I turned to see the hag's face mere inches from mine. Her breath was putrid, and I stumbled backward, my back meeting the cold, damp wall. Paralyzed with shock, I stared at her face, struggling to recognize it beneath the layers of grime. Suddenly, it hit me. Those features were familiar, even in that grotesque state. It was our grandmother's face, the one we only knew from the photograph that sat on the piano in the living room. Her twisted, gnarled hands were inches from my face, and I could feel her cold, bony fingers reaching for me. I was too stunned to move, unable to fathom the horror before me. I cautiously uttered, "Grandma Pearl, is that you?" The woman's movements grew still, and the guttural grunts subsided. But before I could say anything else, I was yanked away, forcefully pulled up the stairs. It was Grandpa, and he was furious. He pushed me into the living room, where Alex and Nora were already waiting, still trembling and in tears. Then he locked the door and left us there for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only about half an hour. We heard loud noises from the basement, rumbling and cursing, followed by an eerie silence, until we heard Grandpa talk on the phone in the kitchen. 20 minutes later, the door finally creaked open, and our mom entered, there to take us back home. We were babbling, speaking over each other, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. But when we asked Grandpa about the woman in the basement, he wore a stern expression and uttered, "You broke the rule. You're not welcome here anymore." And that was the last time we saw him. For months, I tried to convince my mother that I had seen my grandmother in the basement. She reluctantly shared that Grandma Pearl had died in a mental hospital when she was still a child. The police were eventually called in to investigate, just to put my mother's mind at ease. However, they found no evidence to support our terrifying story. It was dismissed as a product of our overactive imaginations, and life went on. Years passed. Grandpa passed away 2 weeks ago, and we found ourselves back at the old house, standing in front of that dreaded basement. But something was different. Instead of the familiar door, we were faced with a solid concrete wall. There was no sign of a basement, as if it had never existed. We were puzzled, but also relieved that we wouldn't have to confront those horrors again. With the house emptied, we left, deciding it was time to leave the past behind, even if we would never get the answers we so desperately sought. Our childhood memories of Grandpa's house would forever be tainted by that night in the basement, a night that left us with more questions than answers.